What is up? What is going on? Welcome to your Thursday night sales tales. So I was in this house. We have a very special episode today. Today we are dedicating this show to a charity that I hold very dear. It is called the Texas Valor Project. You'll notice that the logo is right there. It is a charity that helps veterans and first responders with traumatic brain injury to get the treatment that they need. I ran a tailgate earlier this year, and at the AT&T Stadium when the Jets played the Cowboys, we raised a ton of money for this. I have friends that are involved in this. I am wearing their shirt. You can go get one. So this is going to be a special sort of veterans ode to military episode. I'm really excited about this. I will put the links, and I've already put the links in some of my posts for the Texas Valor Project. So I was asking around about some different stories we hear in the field from veterans. And I heard a really interesting one in one of these groups from an HVAC technician. And he had said that years ago, he was on a new construction site and they were building a condo. And one of the occupants of the building they were working with was a gentleman by the name of Lewis Wilson. And so Lewis Wilson comes out to his, I guess his patio, his deck, comes out the door, and he yells down to all the construction workers and all the guys working. And he goes, "Hey, which one of you guys are veterans?" And, a few guys raise their hand. He goes, "Come on up here." And they all go up there and he serves them breakfast. They all eat breakfast together. And he invited them in. And they walked around, and as soon as they walked in, all of the construction workers stood at attention. And the way that he told this story, he goes, "Well, look up why they stood at attention." And they stood at attention because Lewis Wilson won the Medal of Honor during World War II. You can look up this guy. Pretty cool story. Lighthearted. There's a lot of stories that are not so lighthearted that I've had with specifically with veterans that have had traumatic brain injuries. And that's why this charity is sort of, near and dear for a number of reasons. So donate, get involved in some way. I think they're doing a chili cook-off pretty soon. Excites me. It's pretty neat. They're local to where I live here in Rockwall. And so pretty neat. And so today we actually have a guest on that is also a veteran. I thought this was pretty appropriate. Before we get to our very infamous and special guest, I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. The response to this podcast has been amazing. Last week, we had there, I could see like statistics and all this kind of stuff, and not that it really matters, but there was an engagement of something like 25,000 people. It blew my mind. I mean, we started this thing, less than 2 months ago, and we're having that amount of people. So just absolutely incredible. A lot of that had to do with the fact that, Jennifer is so popular. So very, very cool. So Texas, going back on this Texas Valor Project, visit their site, donate if you can. Like I said, their logo's right here. I'm wearing their shirt. Very, very cool charity. And a really, really quick story. And this is less about like a tale, but I got into a car accident about a year ago, a little less than a year ago. And to show everybody, display how traumatic brain injuries can affect your life, it is mind blowing. I was hit from behind, and the Suburban crashed into me. I mean, full force. I don't even know how fast they were going. My head swung back. I hit the back. I hit the headrest, and within minutes I was concussed. I went to the hospital, and I remember I the experience that I went through was, it was traumatic, to say the least. There were times I was trying, when I went home some days later, and I was trying to just play guitar, and I couldn't, my fingers couldn't even grip the guitar. I couldn't even play. And this is just a concussion. And so this particular charity is for those traumatic brain injuries. I can only imagine what these veterans have gone through. And me, just having, a concussion, which it was pretty severe. It was a pretty severe concussion. I had to go through treatment and doctors and neurologists and all sorts of stuff. But the point is that it can just cripple your life. And there were times I couldn't, guys, I can get to the gym and with the best of them, and I couldn't even function. So the fact that this organization is putting forward 100% of their proceeds and their fundraisers go to getting veterans the treatment that they need for traumatic brain injuries is really special. So please, if you get a chance, go and donate. That being the case, I want to make just really quick, two quick announcements. This is now sprung into, we're going to do an episode coming up called Tattoo Tales. And this is amazing. I have a friend of mine. His name is Ian Jones. He is a famous tattoo artist. He works with Oliver Peck. You guys know Ink Master. He has tattooed for 20 years. His stories, when he tells them, are mind-blowing, of the type of people that he's tattooed over the years. So we're going to do a special episode called Tattoo Tales coming up. Also, I'm wearing this hat. This is Rob Linus. Rob Linus is a pretty famous country music star. It's not really even country. It's hard to explain. He does his own thing. It's like Southern rock, country, outlaw. I can't even explain it. It moves. It's one of my favorite artists ever. He's become a really good friend of mine. And we were talking, he's on the road all the time. He literally plays like over 100 shows a year. He travels around the country. He travels around the world. He's actually traveling to Europe coming up for a festival that he got invited to. And we're going to do a Road Tales. And so this is going to be a whole lot of fun. So we got Tattoo Tales with Ian Jones, and we got Road Tales, all right, with Rob Linus. And check out Rob. He's really cool. Ian Jones. So Ian is Jonesy Zaps on like Instagram. He's got like 11,000 people that follow him. He's incredible. And then Rob Linus, Lines, and he's got millions of streams on all these platforms. Okay. So without further ado, I want to bring on our guest here, our guest who needs no introduction. His name is Brandon Stowe. I will welcome Brandon to the stage. Brandon, what is up, buddy?
How's it going, man? And hey, I just wanted to say real quick, a big thank you to the patrons at the Texas Valor Project, and a shout out to all they do for the vets, and with the help and resources they provide, especially. I got lucky. I had a very, like you said earlier, a very fluffy time in the service, but I had a lot of friends who didn't, and those organizations helped tremendously. So really cool that you brought that on the podcast, and that they're sponsoring it today.
Brandon, tell us about your time in the military very quickly. Okay, you were actually an HVAC tech in the military.
Yeah, I did two things in the military. When I first went into the United States Air Force, I was a 3 Delta, which is a cyber transport. We basically, do all the boring cybersecurity stuff and get people so you can Skype, your family out in the middle of, nowhere, right? So we put up the networks and things like that. And then later on, I'd done HVAC since I was 12, so I had an HVAC background. And I started talking to the guys in the HVAC departments inside of the Air Force, and they kind of had a spot open, and they already were coming to me for advice and things like that. So when I transferred into the Air National Guard, I transferred my job as well, went into HVAC, and started actually when I got in to the HVAC side. I believe I was E4 at the time, and I had pretty much our tech sergeants and things like that were all following me around, trying to learn from me on how to address problems in the what we call FDOCOs, which are field deployable environmental control units. These are the units that get deployed. They have two big hoses on them that attach to the tents and things like that, and you can basically get air conditioning out in these hot climates. If you know much about HVAC, they run on 134A instead of what you see out in the field like R22 or 410A. So they run basically on a refrigerant, and they're very difficult to deal with. They fail a lot, and so they had a need to actually kind of learn how to fix these things. And so I went around and taught a lot of the people who were above me just how to troubleshoot them, and rewrote some manuals, and we had a good time. But yeah, did HVAC in the Air Force as well, and it was a fun time for me.
Yeah, you got any? You said your time in the military was boring, right? I mean, you were doing a lot of HVAC work. You don't have any real juicy tales from your time in the service.
No, the only thing that comes to mind, when I worked in the Air National Guard and for the state of Oregon as a civil, in a civil position at the same time. And when I worked for the state of Oregon, I happened to be working for the Military Installations Division. Now, the Military Installations Division handles all the National Guard military bases in the state of Oregon. So I did my drill weekends at Camp Rylea. And then I also did my normal day job there at Camp Rylea as well as the energy engineer. My direct boss, stateside, civil side, was the TAG, which is the Adjunct General of the state of Oregon. He's a 3-star general, General Stencil. I believe he's still the TAG. He's still the way high up over there. And him and I became really good friends over, he was my direct boss. So anytime I had a project, he was the guy who would approve my budgets, help me go to the state to get bonds, etc. And once I got into the Air National Guard, and he's Air Force, so he's a 3-star general. So they go around and they do inspections at the different, places. And so he came over to the 116th Air Control Squadron, which is where I served, and he was going to do an inspection. So the general travels with his, first sergeant and all this other stuff, and they get there, and just the gravity to kind of put it for people who aren't in the military. When a general's around, it's pretty like you got to have a tight ship. Everybody's doing what they're supposed to.
That's the real brass coming in.
It's the real brass coming in, and typically your wing king is what we call our commanders in the Air Force. Might be a colonel, might be a full bird, might be a colonel major. You get a general around, and even they're scrambling. Now 3-star general is a whole different gravity. And especially the assignments that this guy's had. He's just it's a big deal. And so he comes over, and we're all in this big, large general gathering area. And when he comes in, his first sergeant comes in, everybody goes at attention. Everybody's just, standing straight. And before he calls basically parade rest, general comes beelining over. He catches me. He sees me. He beelines right over to me, and he says, "Brandon, how the hell have you been, buddy?" Now, my civilian side kicks right in. Now, I'm enlisted, right? I'm not an officer or anything like that. My civilian side kicks out. I'm like, "Oh, Stencil, how's it going, man? It's going great." We're going back and forth, and we have a good maybe like 5-minute conversation in front of 250 people who are still all standing like the first sergeant has to have time to talk, and they're all still standing at attention. And he's like, well, hey man, after this, let's go get a cigar, and pats my back. And then the first sergeant, calls rest, and everybody goes about their thing. After that was over, I can only remember my my wing king, Victoria Habis. She came over to me and she said, "Brandon, you scared the shit out of me." And I said, "I am so sorry. What was I supposed to do?" And she says, I don't know, but as soon as you broke, because I basically broke command and formation, I did a lot of bad things, and she's like, I thought my ass was grass. I was like, I'm so sorry about that. She's like, but I'm just glad he loves you. So, I feel good about it now, but don't do that again. And I'm like, okay, so
So it was like meeting a celebrity, right? Like it was like meeting a celebrity. So let me ask you this. So this is kind of funny, and I know this through the grapevine. I think you may have mentioned something here. Like you've worked on celebrities. Haven't you worked on celebrities' houses, or you've worked with celebrities like in your company?
yeah. So, one one that comes to mind, right off the bat is Buzz Bissinger. So if you're a football fan, and you probably have watched Friday Night Lights, and hopefully you've read Friday Night Lights, and that was authored and developed by a guy named Buzz Bissinger, and he happens to live in on the Long Beach Peninsula. I won't say where, but he lives on the Long Beach Peninsula. It's a big peninsula. You'll never find him, and and he's pretty secluded. But we did a job over there, and I got to know him really well, and we started talking. His wife is the I think the education director at NYU Abu Dhabi and New York universities everywhere. Pretty well-to-do family, and he came up to me one day. I was working on his gas fireplace on a maintenance. We'd become good friends from calls past, and he says, "Hey, man, I'm writing an article, and I want you to give me your thoughts because I don't know how well it's going to go over." I said, "Oh, what are you writing about, man?" And he shows me this article about Bruce Jenner at the time. We all still knew him as Bruce Jenner, was going to come out as Caitlyn Jenner, and Bruce and Caitlyn now and Buzz had been friends for a long time because he's a sports writer and Bruce is a sports legend, right?
Yeah. So he's writing the article. He's writing the piece that Bruce Jenner is going to come out as a woman.
Yeah, and nobody knows it yet.
And then no one knows it.
Nobody knows
it. And you are now reading this article in the guy's house.
In my hands. Yeah.
Wow,
in paper. He wrote it and printed it out and put it in my hands.
What did you tell him? Like after you read it?
Well, here's the thing. I knew a bit about, you grow up and he's on the cereal boxes, right? Yeah. And other than that, though, our generation kind of missed his Olympic wins and, all these other things. So for me, he was like just a guy. I knew him, you hear about the Kardashians and stuff. And I think that was his relevance at the time. I didn't really watch that stuff. I was busy working. So I didn't know much about him. I was just like, that's a cool story. Is he that famous, or is this just like a one-off article that's getting buried somewhere in some magazine? And come to find out that he was a columnist for, what's the magazine that it came out on? Vogue or some kind of like a really big magazine. And it came out and it was a world, as everybody knows now, it hit the whole world by surprise. It broke the internet, did all these things. They had a photo shoot where, Bruce
was it a cool, let me ask you, was it a cool house? Like with the house that this guy owned, was it a cool house?
It was a cool house. Everything on the peninsula. It's not the coolest house on the peninsula. The coolest house on the peninsula.
All right. So on that note, what's the cool? Cause you've been doing this a long time. So you own the company now, but you're still like, you got guys in the field, you're in the field, right? So what's the coolest house you've ever worked on?
Fan wise, like, I would say the Goonies house, so
that's cool.
Because, I did most of my career in Astoria, Oregon.
You're from Oregon, and that house, Goonies house, is where in Oregon?
So it's in Astoria, Oregon. Now I'm from the East Coast. I'm like you. I'm an East Coast boy. I just happened to transplant somewhere else.
You work from Pittsburgh. Okay, so you're from Pittsburgh, but you went out there. You were in Oregon. Now, you worked on the Goonies house because the owners of the Goonies house at the time contracted you to work on it, or was it like, because I've heard things like people roll up to, I've heard things, man, or people roll up to the Goonies house all the time, like the owners put like tarps over things because they were so tired of people coming to look at the Goonies house.
Yep.
And, and so
Yeah.
you worked. So what were you doing there?
So I actually worked there before the current owners who hid the house, basically started closing down access to the house. I think they've maybe reopened it. They've come around over the years. When they first bought it, they were like, no, we're remodeling this thing. We just want it as a family house. We bought it because it's charming. We don't want the Goonies stuff anymore. And so the city of Astoria didn't like that. But I actually worked there before that, were the original owner who owned the Goonies house when the movie was being filmed. And so the way it worked, as he explained it to me, is an old guy at this time. I forget the gentleman's name, but he had the house. Universal, I believe it was Universal, came and bought the house for, leased it for however many months production and everything took. At the end of the filming, he got his house back. So he moved out to the house that's actually right beside the Goonies house while it was filming, both houses. And after they were done filming, he actually told me a really cool movie history fact. I don't know how trivia this is. You might be able to find it online. Maybe it's lost to history. And he's dead now. He died a few years later. And that's why it came up for sale again. But he had told me, he said, Brandon, there's a little known secret here in this house. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, wouldn't you believe it, that when they were done filming this movie, and of course they didn't know how historic the movie would be and how significant the cult following it would gain. This is real time for them. He said, when they were done, they didn't want to pay to dispose all of the props or ship them all back to, someplace in Hollywood or things like that. Instead, and actually to his dissatisfaction, he didn't know they did this. They dug up his yard and buried many of the movie props in his backyard. And so he's been uncovering them. And he showed me several, but he'd been uncovering them for the proceeding.
So you buy it? You buy it? You think it's true?
The props he showed me, some of them were fairly weathered. They looked like they were dug up. So I don't know if he did that or they did that or they came that way because movies, they age things. But he had good stories. So whether it was true or not, I'm gonna go ahead and take him at his face value. He has the Goonies house. How are you gonna argue?
What I realized too is that I have run calls where you're talking to a liar. And I'm not saying this guy was, but
sure.
You ever just realize you're like, I am talking to somebody and they are just straight, like every sentence is a lie. You're like, okay, yeah, sure. And of course for me, in sales, I'm like, yeah. Oh, that's a sure. That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good story.
Nod and move on. Yeah.
I mean, what can you do?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've had a few like that. I did have a guy, speaking of vets, we thought the name of the charity's got valor in it. So, I've actually got one of some pretty rampant stolen valor. And it was quite funny, actually, the way it all transpired. I get into this house in Arkansas and there's this guy and he's telling all these stories that to my sales guy who never been in the military. He's taking all this at face value. He comes back. He's like, man, the guy was a commando. And he was like, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, really? That's cool. So, what's he up to now? And so I get this whole story and I'm like, it just doesn't sound right. Doesn't say right with me. And so he ends up having a problem a few months down the line with some of the line set. I guess didn't get re-insulated. There was anyways, we went back for a warranty call. And I decided to go over there and talk to the gentleman. And he's saying how now he's a Ranger and now he's like a top secret, Delta Force Ranger who, is doing all this stuff. And I'm like, man, he's smoking like 6 bowls of weed at this point. Like and you can kind of tell, like, there's a lot of like ex-military people who just like, they live a whole different way than when they were in the military, because frankly, it's tough. That transition, and it's a lot of these projects out there. I represented the 22 a day project for a long time. In fact, I spoke about that at the Veterans Day ceremony to a bunch of Vietnam War vets. But this guy was just off his rocker with the things he was saying. They were so far-fetched and fabricated that most laymen's who haven't been in the military could probably be like, this guy's so full of it. So whether he served and then he embellished his I tell people I was in the Air Force Chair Force. Like I had a boring, you know, military job. There's no reason to glorify it and say I was a commando and paratrooping down and, you know, like into the war torn, you know, villages. And, yeah, it's just simply not the case for many people. But this guy was off his rocker. So we've had a few of those as well.
So speaking of a crossover between like a military sort of story and liars, I went and I ran this call. This is years back. I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. There was a guy, I went in and his car had like flags that was all like Marines. He had Marine stickers everywhere, the door and Marines, wearing a Marines shirt, Marines hat, everything. Then I went inside and talked to this guy. It wasn't even his house. He was there. It's a crazy story, but the guy goes, I go, oh yeah. You served in the Marines, huh? And he's like, nope.
Just love the Marines.
I mean, you got it. I mean, I even said like, oh, son, daughter, uncle, nephew, niece, anybody serve? Nope. The guy was off. I mean, it was, I mean, it's cool to support it. The guy was just off. This is very strange guy.
Well, you know, one of the things I love to do is, you know, I get into a house and we have, like most companies, we have a military discount. And I've talked to so many people. I'm like, hey, you got anybody in the military? You know, you in the military? Was your wife? Did she serve? You know, did your kids? Whatever. They'll say no, and I'll be like, okay, anybody in your family? No. Okay, well, you know, I feel like I'm your family now after we've had this visit. So I tell you what, I served in the Air Force. We're going to give you a military discount today. And I tell you what, you say something like that to these customers, and they're like, wow, I've got someone in the military now. You know, it's just funny to see their, you know, expressions. And then you go through all the awkward phases of them trying to thank you. And I kind of hate that stuff. You know, I actually, like a lot of military members, I hate talking about it. I don't like, you know, I get into stories with other military people, talking to people outside of the military. Yeah, it's just like it's like a whole thing you have to go through of expected response and etiquette and like, yeah, it was great. Yeah, go join the military. Hurrah. You know, like, cool. It was nice. You know, I did my time. I'm out, you know?
Yeah.
But it was fun. You know, I love my time there.
I will have to, I think I'm going to pour a drink for this. I'm going to ask you a tough question.
Ask me one.
Do you see, I got my little crystal decanter thing here.
What do you got in there? What is it?
It's like rye. All right, listen. So tell me, everybody wants to know. Okay. So you crashed and burned a $5 million company. All right. Now this isn't necessarily in a house. It was in lots of houses. So this story can't start with, so I was in this house.
Yeah.
What happened? You lost. I mean, that's right. You crashed and burned a $5 million company, right?
Yeah, you know, and it's probably a typical business story. You know, here's the thing is I started my first, I guess I'll precursor this. I started my first mechanical company when I was 24 years old, right? Definitely don't recommend a 24-year-old with limited experience. Now, top technician I was. Like, I'm very quick learner. You know, I was a good salesperson. Like, I had all the field skills. Probably locked down to where some people have trained their whole life to get to that. And I'm not trying to brag. It's just where I was at the time. I was knocking.
Well, it's okay. You are, but go ahead.
And so what happened is I started this company young, and I'm a workaholic. So I was a workaholic when I was in the military. I was in the workaholic at my last job at P&L Johnson as a HVAC tech and then operations manager. And so I got to work in 24/7, ended up kind of destroying the marriage. And what happened was, you know, here's the thing. She went out. Now I had a business, got an employee, but I treated him like a partner, right? I hired him and found out that there was an affair. It was a horrible thing to find out at the time. And so you know, obviously he got fired, you know, but then, you know, with the divorce and everything else, 25, 26 years old, in my second year of business, to handle all that, to go through that. And then I made a really fatal mistake. You know, don't go into business and create a sole proprietorship. Don't do it, especially if you live in Washington, because guess what? Your business is now common property. And in Washington, you know, she gets a portion of that business. And so, you know, her her resolve was to liquidate it as fast as she could, and kind of, and the judge, I mean, frankly, in the state of Washington, you're just going to lose. So,
I'm
I
not
mean,
laughing. I'm not laughing at your situation, Brandon. You
oh,
have to
it's
forgive me.
fine. It's been
It's
many
funny
years.
because here's why I find it to be funny. It's because are very open about the fact that you crashed and burned a $5 million business, right? And it was a terrible situation, and you lost all this money, and there's a divorce involved, and there's all this stuff involved.
Oh, and then we got fined by the state. We got fined by the state. Like, it's because now I'm trying to manage this, and I'm trying to get to all these divorce hearings. I'm also paying a divorce lawyer like $45,000 at this point. And, we ran our company as backwards as anybody else, right? Like, so who is inexperienced, and they're in their $5 million first company. They've got a lot of system, you and I are both systems people. We've talked back and forth in the past about systems. And this company would be a company, one of us would be elected to help, and there's a lot of issues in this company.
Right.
And so, what we say to a lot of people that we're working with nowadays is, hey, if you can't take a break from your business, you've got a job, right? Like, if you can't go on a vacation. Well, the same is true as if you can't tend to your divorce without your company failing around you, right? If you can't go to a court hearing without all your jobs blowing up that day. And so me trying to juggle those things, I had to start picking priorities, right? Because I had kids in the balance. And so, my priority is going to be my children. And so I had to go to the court. I had to do these things. I had to pay the lawyers. And frankly, it wasn't good for business because I didn't have a business with systems that could run itself. I didn't have a team that knew what they were doing. I ran everything like a fire marshal. And, I was the every face of my people. I came in, I ran the meetings in the morning. I helped with the schedule in the morning. I made sure things were smooth. I called the customers when they had problems. And so, with me out of there, and plus I had to fire my right-hand man right at the onset of this. So I didn't have him, right? Because he was the affair partner. So that was out of the question. And with all of this stuff, that's a natural recipe for an implosion. And that's just what happened. So I ended up having to sell the business for assets. I had a really beautiful building in the middle of Long Beach, huge 10,000 square feet. I had beautiful sheet metal shop, big, custom sheet metal shop that we had built. And
so you lost it all. You lost it all.
I sold all of it. Yeah. Yep.
You got lost it all. So,
sheet
all
metal
right,
shop still in Long Beach. I sold to a contractor.
So I think people like to hear the other side, right? Okay. So this is the part of the movie where it's like rock bottom. You lost everything. You're in the streets. You got the bottle of booze in the brown bag and right. And now you go back here and so you turn it around. Now what'd you do there? How'd that story go?
Well, I stopped doing anything for about 6 months. I took 6 months because I just had a big traumatic thing happen to me. 2 big traumatic things, actually 3 big traumatic things. And I pretty much moved, up north to Seattle, almost experienced total homelessness. I mean, I went through a range of different things. So it almost wasn't a bounce back. It was actually a descend into like really questioning myself. How did I, the things that you were achieving in the past become like these distant memories?
Go into that. What do you mean homelessness? Like, tell me, like,
I almost lived in my van. Yeah, I kept 2 vans from selling everything. I had 2 vans left over, 2 almost brand new Chevy Expresses. And when I took everything into Everett, into Seattle, Everett's actually where I lived. It's funny, your name's Everett. So I took everything over there, and as I was looking, for a means and place to live or to kind of start up something, I got darn near close to calling it and just living in my van. Like, I mean, I was running out of money quick. When you sell things for assets, you got to remember, you got the piper to pay, you've got employees that you owe their final checks to, you've got a lot of things to do. And so just making it at that point was really difficult because we did $5 million, but we put the production of a $7 million company, into
you weren't making. You weren't making. I mean, you were building.
We were underpriced. We were underpriced, like a lot of businesses that don't know their pricing, right? And so, I wasn't making bank. I wasn't rich living on the top of the hill. My last stated W-2 there was $700,000, but most of it was going back towards other loans that I was self-funding and financing for the
Yeah.
company, and so, it was a loop. And so, yeah, I got really close there, and I finally brought my boat. Not, I'm actually on a boat, but it's a whole different boat, but I had a different boat at the time. I was able to get my boat brought up to Everett, and I decided, I was like, I'm going to stay on this boat for a little while, and I'm going to, do some therapy and do some therapy with my then partner, and, kind of figure out what is life? What am I doing? Where am I
Mm,
going from here? Like, I was the golden boy in Long Beach for a long time. I was the kid
mm,
who did no wrong. I had a really sterling career from working at P&L Johnson and being the operations manager of that company, bringing it from $12 million to $20 million in revenue. I went to the state as an engineer, was the youngest engineer in state history, had a great National Guard service record, honorably discharged. Everything. I had a white picket fence and a nice house. Everything was pretty much a semi-charmed life up to that point. And so I really had to go through a lot of self-discovery and say, where do I take it now? What am I all about, and whose fault is it? So I got into stoicism and really just kind of realizing that my pain comes from me, and the things that I do in life are my things and not other people's things to fix. And so the more that I sat there and blamed my ex-wife and the person, her affair partner, and the more I blamed the employees for not being strong enough for when I was, out and not really heeding what I would tell them verbally, but I didn't have a system to back them up. So I had to go back and say, well, why did they do that? Why did they do that? And it all comes back to me, right? Like, how did I set my expectations? How did I bring it back out to so that they could actually get what I'm doing other than just in the moment?
this is really insightful. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
I want to dig further because this is like, most people don't know this stuff. You're going to therapy and you're living on a boat. And so now how'd you turn it around? I mean, you started looking within, trying to
Yeah.
figure out what's the next step. Where's
Yeah.
Brandon going to go?
Two companies. First company is I met a fella on Indeed, actually, or not. Yeah, I think it was Indeed. He messaged me on Indeed. I uploaded a resume. I was going to do what a lot of people who fail a business do. I was going to just go back to work. So I put my resume up, and a guy named Dwight Miller messages me, and he says, "Hey man, I really like your resume. Let's talk." I talked to him and Derek, and turns out they were starting up a company called Lifetime Heating in Snohomish, and so I got involved with that. I brought my stuff. They said, "Well, let's do this. We're starting up this company. It's brand new." They came from BDR companies. They had a lot of good experience, in their sales. It seemed like really genuine people. And so they brought me in, and we were going to do a partnership and basically take over Snohomish. I think now Lifetime has maybe like 1,000 or 2,000 reviews, a highly regarded company in Snohomish, beautiful company. And then they brought in Matt Allred and Dan Allred from Allred's Heating in Federal Way. And we were going to do a 5-way partnership. We got the lawyers, we were drawing up all the contracts. Everything was going beautiful. We were doing jobs together. We were kicking it out of the ballpark. And really, between what Dwight and Derek's vision were and what Dan and Matt, my vision was, we kind of, at some certain point, we decided to kind of all go our own way. So they went and stayed with their Allred. They didn't merge it with the company. Dwight and Derek ended up continuing to run Lifetime. And I started a company called Thermal Tech Refrigeration because my heart at the time was out of residential and I was into commercial. And so I met another.
I want to pause for a second here. So a lot of people don't know a lot of the industry lingo. Just so basically, Brandon worked for an air conditioning company and decided to go into more coolers, like restaurant refrigeration and like trucks, whatever. Yeah. Also supermarkets, yeah. All this kind of stuff, right? So, yeah. All right, so you start this company, and is this where you did all that commercial work? Is this where you took? Didn't you take on this massive commercial job?
That was with my first company, Stowe Mechanical.
Oh, okay.
We did the massive commercial job. We can get to that. This is actually pretty interesting. So I got a job. I went on to Facebook and I got a job. I started up this refrigeration company. I called it Best Mechanical. And this guy messages me. He owns a bunch of Dairy Queens, he says, and he's some Indian guy. And he's like, I got a bunch of Dairy Queens. Come and work on my Dairy Queens. We need a new refrigeration guy. I was like, sweet, good, solid contract. A lot of Dairy Queens. I get to talking to him, and in 2012, he founded a company called Thermaltech Refrigeration, but he lost his partner shortly thereafter, and his name is Nadeem Ahmed, and me and Nadeem became really close. Turns out he owned 37 Dairy Queens, and guy has more money than God. I mean, he's just insane entrepreneur, and he really brought me under his wing, and we reincorporated Thermaltech Refrigeration. I became his business partner, and we started petitioning 7-Elevens and Dairy, his network, right? Like the Indian people network.
Right. If you're gonna do Dairy Queen, you might as well do
might as well
do 7-Elevens. I mean, what else do we got in there?
Well, we
Some
were
gas
looking at
stations.
Yeah, we were looking at a company called Source Refrigeration, and they had a really great maintenance program where they would charge small businesses like that and small little fast food restaurants and stuff about $1,000 a month, and it would include all their maintenance, and things like that. And so we started striking these contracts all up and down Washington, and ended up building. In the first couple of weeks, we already had a pipeline of $300,000 to $400,000 a month of work in commercial refrigeration, and so right back, on top of things again. We got a beautiful building in Lakeside, which is by Tacoma, and started going on. Hired a bunch of refrigeration people, and we started doing maintenance.
But you had some crazy nights out, right? When you were working there, you had some interesting.
Yeah. So again, that's Stowe Mechanical. This is probably a good segue back into the first business. So those businesses.
The reason why I asked this is because, and I love hearing. I mean, your stories were pretty cool about this bounce back, and now Crackjack and all this kind of stuff, and you've obviously created all these businesses. And one of the things about this podcast that's I think refreshing for people is that it's not a business podcast, it's not a business building podcast. Your story is just interesting, which is why I've loved hearing it.
So let's get into that. So we've got a decline, right? It's Stowe Mechanical. This as the divorce stuff is happening. Once the divorce was finalized, I had the company just for a little while longer, right? So I was trying to keep, I wasn't just trying to shut it down. I was trying to keep it going.
Trying to keep the lights on, brother. Yep.
I was fighting. And so a losing battle, but I was fighting. And at the time, we had just got fined by the state of Washington like $40,000 in electrical fines because the company we were contracting wasn't reporting. They weren't taking out permits on the jobs we hired them for. It was a shit show, and so I took out $20,000 in cash, and I went to the bank. It was just one of these things. I knew it felt like doom and gloom. And so I was like, I'm just going to take this out in cash just in case, like, the state's coming for me. And that's probably, I don't know, it might be borderline fraudulent. Don't do this.
That's like, that's like the natural thing to do, right? I mean, you're like, okay, everybody's coming for me and I need, I want to make sure I've got at least some sustenance. So I'm going to take $20,000 in cash out of the bank and put it in my wallet.
Took $20,000 out, and I went to the bank, and when I withdrew the $20,000, the bank teller people, they were very nice and friendly to me, and they invited me to the bar that night. And so I decided to go out and go to this bar, and ended up getting lit and partied till 4 a.m. in the morning. It was in Astoria, in Oregon, in the same area. Right, we were right down by the Goonies house.
Hold on. So you've got the $20,000 in cash from the bank.
Put in a white envelope.
In your pocket.
In an envelope, yep.
And you get invited by some employees at the bank to go out on a night out.
Yep.
Okay.
And
But you didn't go home and put it in your safe or anything like that.
nope,
You kept the
no.
$20,000 on you.
Yeah, I pulled out like $1,000 to spend at the bar. And and so
Yeah.
we get there. I'm getting drunk. I'm buying everybody at the bar drinks on the dance floor. We're having a good time. We get back to some apartment. I don't even know where I ended up at. And I wake up the next morning, and I remember that we held a taxi. I ended up throwing like $500 at the taxi cab driver, like just threw it in the car. I didn't even know how to count out money at this point. I just thought, take this. They're like, okay.
Oh my gosh.
And
What an
I wake up and I call my buddy Carson, who worked for me. He was one of my employees, and I said, Carson, come get me. And he's on my free. He might see this. But I said, Carson, come get me. He's like, Brandon, it's like 6:00 in the morning. I'm like, come and get me, man. I don't know where I hear. I'm sending my ping. So I send him my ping. He comes and grabs me. I was like, take me to Astoria. I need to go to my vehicle. I've got something in there I need to retrieve. So I'm remembering that the $20,000 in the envelope I left in the car. And I get there and I don't know. I forgot to lock the car doors. I made a
Oh
grave
my
error. I made a
gosh.
horrible mistake.
Oh
The money
my
was gone.
gosh.
Everything was gone. They ransacked the place. And so I lost $20,000 in one night. And ended up the next day I went back into the Monday rolled around.
Wait, hold on. We got to dig here for a second here. So was there anything else missing from the car?
Yeah, I think there was like some like clothing items, like a jacket and a hat and whatnot that were missed, but not much. I think they took my aux cord.
So you left your car door unlocked with 20 G's in it.
Yeah.
And you go back and it's missing. Oh my god.
And it's cash. So what can you do? Like I'm trying to see if there's security footage, but we didn't get any good leads. I mean, the money was gone. And so I go back in Monday to the business, and I'm determined to get that $20,000 back one way or the other. So put my sales guys on notice. My guy Carl Hintz, who was selling ductless for me at the time, we were the ductless leader in the area. And I tell Carl, I say, Carl, I'm coming with you on all the leads. We're going to close every single freaking job. The next 2 days we're in close.
Yeah.
We're in close freaking. And so
you're short 20 G's at this point in time. You're like, okay, I got to go make some money.
We went out and sold everything. Like there wasn't a job we didn't close. I mean, we sold every single job in 2 days. I didn't, you never get the 20,000, but you can't make up for that loss. Right. But I got it back to where there was no issue for the, $20,000 being lost.
You could make payroll.
Yeah. And, but that again, like, telling that story is kind of fun now, but during the time and soon after, the issue is you had to look at yourself and say, man, is this the kind of behavior that you expect to have leading a company? Is this the kind of behavior that's going to like serve you for the rest of your life? And you have to realize like, man, maybe I'm in a bad place. Maybe this whole thing is affecting me. Men hide trauma really, really well, right? Like men do not talk about it. They don't talk about their issues or their problems or the things they're going through. And there's no support circle, because men don't have a support circle of other men, like very rarely. So I had to work through a lot of that.
Hold on. So now this brings me up because I heard about this other story. So talking about men and talking about jobs and talking about bad decisions. You had a very interesting commercial job that you did, like a huge commercial job that you did. And you later found out about something crazy about one of your employees. Tell this story. What is this about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. So wherever you found this information. So I had a guy that I hired.
I have my sources, Brandon. I have my sources.
His name was Mike.
People know me.
People
okay,
talk.
I'm kind of a big deal. If you didn't know,
I guess
my apartment is filled with many leather-bound books and smells of rich mahogany.
Oh, wow, very good. And yet it's just rye in the decanter. I don't buy it, but
I love it.
So we hired this guy named Mike. Mike was a cool guy, and he had some experience. And I had just sold an $850,000 refrigeration job. This was replacing an old rack system, which a rack system is basically the condensers, the refrigeration units that run all the cases that have all the cold food in them in the supermarket, right? So
Yeah.
all the
It's a big
background
job.
stuff.
It's a big job. Yeah, it's a big
And
job.
so we approached these jobs really tactfully. We put some refrigerated semi trucks out there, gave them 0 downtime turnovers. It was really beautiful the way we had this strategized. And I hired this guy named Mike. He comes in, and I get him on this job, and we have a basically 2.5-week timeline to run this refrigeration piping, 4,000 feet of 1 3/8 and 5/8 tubing. Big
It's
pipe.
irrelevant. You had a big job,
irrelevant,
and
right?
you
Big
hired
job.
you hired Mike, who had a lot of experience.
Well, this is why it's relevant. So 2.5 weeks to pipe in something like this, and I get back on the second day, and I'm going to go walk the job site and inspect how everything's happened. I find Mike up in like a little crawl space between a walk-in freezer and an attic. Like there's just about 2 feet of space. I find him up there, and he's at the tail end of the store, and I'm like, come down out of there, Mike. What's going on? Why are you up there? So he gets down. He says, hey, man, that was the last piece of pipe. I'm all done. We're all good. Everything's good. Great. Good. Just starts spazzing out on me. I'm like, what do you mean everything's done?
A 3-week job, and it's 2.5 days in.
2.5 days
and the job's done.
Right. And so now I'm pretty naive because I've never done drugs in my life. I've smoked a little weed, and that's it. Like that's all for me. So I'm pretty naive when it comes to people on drugs, what to look for, all that kind of stuff. To me, but something's not sitting right. I'm like, what do you mean it's 2.5 days? What do you mean you're done with the piping? And I'm noticing that he's like twitching a lot, and he's like, and I know about people who are like tweaked out, right? And so
this guy was tweaking.
So I asked my buddy who does know about drugs and stuff from his past partying days, and he's like, "Oh yeah, man, that guy's tweaking on some speed or something." And so I asked him point blank, and I said, "Hey, Mike, come into my office. I need to talk to you." So he comes in, and this is the next day, and he's actually now got a couple like sores where he's picking, and now I'm like, okay, because I've been looking this up all night. I'm like, man, is he on like heroin? And so I asked him point blank, I'm like, hey, bro, are you on drugs? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm on drugs.
Just straight up.
Yeah, it's just straight up. And I said, what are you on? And he's like, I'm on a few things, but mostly heroin. And I'm like, okay. So when you piped the store the other day, were you on drugs the whole time? And he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, I was tweaking big time. And I said, okay, well, I got to fire you. Like, this is your last day of work. Now I fire him and I go back to the job site. Cause now I'm thinking, shoot, man, we got to redo all this. It's going to set us back a week. I go back to the job site. The piping is flawless. the piping is perfect. Like to the inch perfection. So I couldn't believe it.
The story. So the moral of the story is, don't drug test your employees. It doesn't matter. They can do great work. They can do great work. In fact, you should encourage giving drugs to your employees to do better work.
We replaced all the candy bowls at the office with pill bowls. No, it's never good. You can't do that. But tell you what, I'm glad that the job worked out well. But I was also really heartbroken for Mike because his life didn't go well after that, right?
No.
And so
you fired him. What did you expect, bro? You fired him.
I know. It was all downhill.
You could have given him an olive branch. Come on, dude.
And so, for me about people, right? Like, I actually wouldn't have cared if the job took a week extra. If my people are healthy and doing the best they can, that's really important to me. It was very lucky that job turned out the way it did. I got extremely lucky because that's probably the rarest case. If someone's on drugs, they're most typically destroying your job site. We've had a few since that have done the opposite, but you root them out.
Was that the toughest fire? Probably not. Let me ask you this.
No.
What was the toughest firing or conversation you've ever had to have with an employee?
My right-hand guy, Carson. So Carson, when I hired Carson, he's a young guy. He was like just turned 18, and he had been approaching me since he was 16. We did all the work at the place that he worked at, the store that he worked at. And so every time we go in there and do work, he was super outgoing. He would just come up to me and be like, when can you train me? I know what I want to do with my life. I want to be an HVAC man. And like, just for years, he would approach me. I'd be like, man, I can't hire you till you're 18. This is just one of those trades. You got to be 18. And so he turned 18 and he approached me again. He said, I'm 18 now, man. I've been waiting for 2 years. I'm like, how could I not hire you? So I hire him and we train him. He becomes basically like kind of like my errand guy and parts runner and my right-hand guy, right? And I get really fond of Carson. And he's just a kid who's always trying, and he's a good, honest guy. But it took a while to train him. And even after he was trained, he just kept making just the simplest mistakes over and over. He'd have correction. The managers would correct him. He went out with several different journeymen, tried switching him up. I sent him through the Northwest College of Construction, and it just never clicked. He's just not a mechanical guy that way. And so after a bunch of complaints, some from customers and some from fellow employees who felt like they had to babysit him all the time, I had to make the decision to let him go. Now I have a firing ritual, and I fire everybody the same way. If I have to fire someone, I always do it in the morning. So unless it was something like this drug guy, I fired him on the spot. Actually, it was the next morning. Tell you what, he came in the office next morning, but it's always the next morning. I call them in first thing in the morning. I relieve them then. I arrange their transport. I make sure all their stuff gets collected well. I try to separate in the best way possible, and I try to have a heart-to-heart with them. I bring them in. It's just me and them. And so I bring Carson in, and so they all know what happens. Like if I'm calling in a single person, like at 7 o'clock in the morning into my office like that, they know that they're either getting promoted or fired, like something's happening. And so he comes in and he's got his head hung low and he's kind of anticipating it. And it's something I was just dreading to do. And I say, hey, Carson, I mean, you know why you're here? And he says, I think I do. And I said, we've gotten some complaints, and I believe in being real. Like, I'm going to tell you, if I don't tell you where you failed, if I just say, hey, we need to part ways, and I don't give you some kind of reporting so you can do better the next job, I feel like I'm doing you a little disservice. And so I told him everything, and man, he cried and cried. And I'm not a crier. So I just, trying to console him, but it was tough. It was tough letting him go because it was 4 or 5 years in the making, 1.5 years with him as an employee, and then letting him go finally. It was a tough deal, but he's doing great now. He's got a great job. And he came back and he thanked me several years later. He actually traveled to one of my job sites. He saw my van at, and he went in and he said, hey man, I just want to thank you because the way that you let me go made me realize I was at a decision point in my life and I had to evaluate things that I was doing. I lost a bunch of weight. I quit smoking and I went and got this job, and now I'm doing pipelines, and, I'm making good money, and I credit you. And so, it turned out good in the end for Carson.
That's a great story. And it's tough when you have you invest so much into somebody. I train people all continuously. I've trained, I can't even count the amount of people I've trained. And sometimes you have to ask yourself, did you fail that person, or did that person just couldn't hack it? And that's tough. And in this case, obviously he couldn't hack it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, man.
Because that is it's introspective, because we pour so much into people as leaders, and sometimes it just doesn't work out, and it stinks because it's a time investment for you, and it's a time investment for them. But letting them go was the right thing to do. Thank you for that. That was good.
And by the way, if you would have asked me the second hardest person I fired, probably be myself. So I want leaders to hear that too. Is like, it's also challenging to let go of the things you're not and realize that you're not fit for a certain position. Companies have many positions to fill, and owners typically try to wear all the hats and fill all of them. And so I'm a guy who went from a severe micromanager of things to having to like really rein in the fact that I'm not everything in the company. I'm not every position. And so, the it's a daily challenge for me. Maybe not an emotional fire, but I have to step back in a lot of capacities and realize, hey, I'm just not the man. I'm not the person for this. I'm not a great CSR. I'm not good at dispatching. I'm not good at a lot of marketing. I'm not good at even a lot of mid-level management. I'm good at high-level stuff. I'm good at visionary, but mid-level management, I suck. Horrible.
Yeah. Well, but you know what you're good at, and we're gonna wind down here. But I know there's a specific story that you ran into on a trip, and I got to hear. I think everybody needs to hear this. Something to do with Cleveland. Something happened in Cleveland. I don't know. I'm hearing it through the
Oh
grapevine.
boy, you're bringing out
Well,
the
so here's the
stories.
thing. Listen, the firing story. Okay, with was it Carlson? Is that his name?
Carson.
Carson. It was. I mean, heartwarming. I mean, that was.
So got into it with a banger.
Yeah, it was heartwarming. I mean, it really was. I mean, that's a great story. I loved hearing that. No, seriously, I in fact, it came out of left field. I'm glad that you shared it, but I heard something happened in Cleveland that maybe you're not so proud of. So I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna just ask you, okay, and tell the story of what happened in Cleveland, Ohio, because I heard things happen.
Oh boy, I'm gonna precursor this story. So up until now, most of the stories we're telling have happened a decade ago. So I want everybody to know that, like,
okay, you're gonna precursor it with it didn't happen anytime recently, and there
definitely
you go.
not. Now, old Brandon.
All right, now on with the boring
Brandon
stuff. Let's go, man.
Old Brandon was a fun Brandon, and fun Brandon had some really good times in Cleveland. And the story goes this is going to take about 3-4 minutes to explain, so just bear with me. It starts off the back of actually selling that $800,000 condenser job. We sell that job, and the guy pays $450,000 up front, just strikes up a check, hands it to me, and says, let's get this job going. He also pays first-class tickets for us to go to Cleveland because we were sourcing our refrigeration units, these rooftop rack systems. They're very rare. You got to go places to get them. We're sourcing them from Cleveland. They had just come off of a Walmart. These were used rack systems that just came off of Walmart. And so we had to go check them out, make sure they were good, that they sealed them up right, the whole 9 yards. So I get these first-class tickets with my business partner, the one who would eventually have an affair with my wife. And we go to, right, it's crazy. And we set off and get to Cleveland, Ohio. Now, when we get there, we do a few things first. So, we've got all this money, and so obviously we book at the Ritz-Carlton. And we get a Dodge Challenger to drive around in, which at the time, that was just cool for us, 2015. And we feel like we're high on the hill. I've got all this money in my pocket, and we took our commissions up front on that job, so we were doing pretty well. And I decide, let's go to the casino. Let's go out and have a good night. Let's just not just be here for business. So me and him get out to the casino, and if you know Cleveland, the Ritz-Carlton is basically directly connected to Jack's Casino on the waterfront there. And
oh gosh. Well, Brandon apparently has AT&T service because he is completely frozen. Oh man, funny. The internet. Well, I'm not going to finish the story for him. I guess you're just going to have to ask him directly. But apparently there were some events that happened at the Ritz-Carlton that you're going to have to end up asking him yourself. Well, Brandon's frozen on my screen, and I'm just going to go ahead and and make the couple announcements. I made these earlier just so you guys know. We have Rob Linus, famous country, Southern rock, whatever you want to call it. Rob Linus, Leines. He's coming on the show to do road tales about his travels in America. And then we got Tattoo Tales with Ian Jones, who is like a crazy tattoo artist, works with Oliver Peck. Incredible tattoo artist, has amazing stories, blow your mind stories. Incredible. And then the most important thing of this this episode here. It was Texas Fowler Project. Make sure to donate to Texas Fowler Project. I think we got him back. I think we got.
Guys.
All right, so you're gonna have to speed. I almost made my final announcements here. You're gonna have to go ahead.
This is the danger of being on a boat, but I'll just continue. We'll close it up. So very, very shortly. So we go to the Jack's Casino. I give him $1,000. I got $1,000. He loses his $1,000, but I'm up 2,000, so I give him another $1,000. We decide with this $2,000 that we now have left over that we're gonna go to Wahlburgers to get some chili. Their famous chili. Never been to the Wahlburgers, but I love the actors. So I was like, cool, I'm going to go get some chili at Wahlburgers, Cleveland, Ohio. Amazing. We get the chili. And then he's like, you know what? It's still the night's young. Let's go hit up the East 5th Bar District. The East 5th Street is a bar district in Cleveland. It goes all the way down the whole entire street, both sides bars. So we made ourselves a little challenge that we would go into each bar down the road and basically do a bar crawl and have one strong drink at each bar. See how far we get. We make it to the last bar. We're drunk as could be, and we end up bowling with each other. We're doing $100 bet on bowling. I lost another $1,000 in bowling. And at one point, it's time to get back to the hotel. Now, this was right in the middle of the Black Lives Matter stuff. It just started happening. And I am wasted beyond the most wasted I'd ever been in my life.
You're in Cleveland, you're wasted, and you just bowled and you lost a bunch of money.
A bunch of money. We're on the sidewalk and there's a panhandler. He waits outside the bar district, little old black guy, and he's sitting there and he's saying $20, right? He's waiting for the drunk patrons from the bar. Very smart, a great business plan. And at the time, I'm wasted. So I go up to him, I put my hands on his shoulders. I say, hey, man, I want to let you know that I ain't got $20 for you, but I love you, brother. You are my best friend, and I got to tell you, man, Black Lives Matter to me. And that's what I said to him. I look him right in the eyes, and the whole time he's saying, amen, brother. Amen, brother. And now my guy, he's over here, and he's like, you're going to get shot. I'm leaving. Right. So I get into the elevator finally. I feel bad because this elevator is gold plated. Right. I just told this guy I don't have $20 to give him. I feel bad about it to this day. But anyways, we get to the room. I fall asleep. I wake up naked in the fetal position at the end of the bed. The first thing I do is I look around and I say, what's happened? Like, this is not the way that I normally wake up. So I look around and I lift up the sheets, and if any of you guys hate the gross stuff, exit out and I'll see you next podcast. But there was a bunch of the Wahlburgers chili all over these Egyptian Ritz-Carlton sheets. And apparently I thrown up in the middle of the night and I just whipped off all my clothes and slept fetal position at the bottom of the bed. I ruined their bed. It soaked through many layers, the comforter, the sheets, everything. And what can I do? I can't clean it up. It's there. This is chilly. And so I left a large sum of money in a in an envelope under the lamp, and a very profuse apology note, letting them know that I'm so sorry. But pretty much that got me off of alcohol for the next year. I couldn't even think about whiskey without just getting sick to my stomach. I'm pretty sure I got some kind of liver dysfunction from that night, but it happens, man. That's what we did.
And with that, Brandon, thank you for coming on. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I think it's been informative and insightful. And also I'm just really glad that you kind of shared and opened up. I mean, you really did. You talked about mental health. You talked about, losing your business. I mean, I don't think people do that enough. And you earlier said that there's not enough people, guys that get the chance to really vent to other guys. It's like, we just kind of all hide it in. And, part of my purpose for this podcast was this forum to talk about your experiences, because all the other podcasts are all about, oh, it's business, but a lot of them anyway. It's like business building and process building and what's going on with AI. And I listen, we're in the business world every single day. We do that in our daily lives. But part of this is about it's cathartic, and it's about, there's more to it than just, than just making money and what we're going to instill in our business. And I have nothing against those podcasts at all. They're amazing podcasts. They're amazing, resources. But I thank you, man. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for opening up. And I'm gonna close it out. That's it, man.
Thank you so much for having me, and appreciate you, man. It's been great.
See you, man. Okay, guys, until next week, where I have Esty coming on from Certain Path, and she's a business coach, and she does all sorts of amazing things. And then obviously I talked about Ian and Rob. So thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Thank you to all the veterans out there. I know it's not like Veterans Day or July 4th or anything like that, but I just felt the need to do this. Texas Valor Project, please donate. And we will see you next week.